Hi everyone, Adrian here from the Black Heart Red Spade podcast, coming to you from London, UK. Today I've got a very special guest on, Dr. Ernest Frost. He is someone I've known for a very, very long time. He was my mentor during my NLP training. We built up a really, really good, long friendship over the years. Ernest is someone whom I've engaged with on so many topics. I can't even delve into all of them during this session, but we've stayed in touch over the years. We've exchanged many ideas. He's someone whom I feel has made an incredibly huge contribution to my life and served as an immensely valuable guide, both on a mentorship basis, but also as a personal friend. And without further ado, I would absolutely love to introduce him to you guys, because I feel there's a hell of a lot that you'll be able to learn, and many insights that you'll be able to derive. So Ernest, welcome, and thank you for being here.
Thanks, Adrian.
Yeah, so Ernest, please tell us a bit more about yourself. You know, we would like to hear your story.
Well, I'm living in Australia now for maybe about 10 years and making a life here, helping people every day to change their minds and change their perceptions, and plugging back into their true selves. That's in a nutshell what I do. Through various techniques, mind techniques, hypnosis, NLP, and some other stuff. Making the shift, making internal shifts. And when you make the internal shifts, your external reality can shift as well. It always begins inside of you. The world only gives you what you ask for, mainly unconscious. So most of my work is to reprogram or reinvent, repattern, whatever you want to call it, the unconscious stuff. And most people don't even know what is all down there. I sometimes say that I'm a pattern detector or a private detective. I'm mainly interested in the recurring patterns, fractal patterns, which keeps recurring in people's lives, and especially the patterns they don't want. And no matter what they do or think or try, it keeps following these patterns. And these are the patterns I'm interested in, and helping them to change those unconscious structures and patterns. So that's what I do.
Jeez, I mean, hearing that description is actually quite remarkable, because it's so applicable to all of us in all facets of life. Because I think, you know, from personal perspective, I think what many of us want, whether we consciously know it or not, is some form of peace and feeling that we've got this. You know, we've got a hang of life in some way or form. And you know, when you look at the unconscious mind, I think I hope I'm recalling this correctly, that your conscious mind processes something like 40 bits of information per second whenever you see or hear something, but your unconscious mind processes something like, is it 20,000 or 200,000 bits of information per second? Millions of bits of information per second. So you literally cannot even compare the speed at which one operates over the other. And yet the conscious mind, as Ray Dalio pointed out in his book called Principle, is what makes you, the me that I'm speaking to you and the you that's speaking to me. Yet your unconscious mind essentially makes up the rest of you that you're not even aware of. So it's almost like a Jekyll and Hyde that's continuously fighting for control over you. And I don't know if that's a correct assessment or not, but it's an interesting one, and I would like to hear your thoughts on that.
Quite a nice. I think in the end, it's a lot of the patterns is that Jekyll and Hyde can make friends and come closer to each other. Most people's challenges is because it's either or. It's one or the other. Then it's Mr. Jekyll, then it's Mr. Hyde. And when we get triggered, often the darker side comes out, and that's the part you don't have control over. So most of the work I do is for people to integrate Jekyll and Hyde, that they can actually share, and that both parts integrate, and it's more in flow, and it's not either or, that they actually integrate in the form of a wholeness. They still have their unique separateness, but they're also the same and integrated at some level. It's never the either or, it's both. And I think that's sort of when, as Korzybski said, when we have the either or thinking, it creates insanity. It is always about having both concepts at the same time. So a lot of patterns in hypnosis and NLP and therapy is about having both at the same time and bringing these parts closer to each other. And I think what you said there is what we want. It's such a simple question. What do you want? And that in itself can be quite complex, because what you want and what you think you want and what really will bring the change are sometimes very different things. And for some people, if not all people, it can be quite a journey till they come to the space to know what they want. One thing I've discovered is anything you want in your life, anything which is not in your life, is purely a manifestation of what's happening inside of you. So in some way, your life is always perfect. Perfect in a sense, it cannot not be different. Whatever you have, what you are in your life right now, whatever the state of the world is exactly perfect. It cannot not be like that. It's always just a conscious manifestation, or as we say in quantum physics, it's where the wave become particle, become solid states. So what's happening in your life, in the world right now, is a solid manifestation of all the unconscious forces. So when people make statements like, it shouldn't be like this, it's always, it should, because it's exactly in balance at the moment. The outer and inside is always perfect balance. It can never be out of balance. No matter how bad, how good, it's always perfect balance. And it was quite a concept for me the day when I started changing my thinking in that sense. So whatever is in your life now is in perfect balance, whether it is make you happy or whether it's really what you want at that moment. Different story, but whatever is there is always perfect. And look what's underneath, and what is these forces creating this? And that's where you have to make the change. And that's mainly then, as you say, that's in the domain of the unconscious. You won't think yourself out of it. I sometimes say also, you won't meditate yourself out of it or pray yourself out of it. It's useful techniques. Sometimes it asks more, and to break through these levels. Awareness is sometimes a first step, but sometimes it asks more. It asks you to go deeper. The second thing I want to say, we cannot create anything from lower states. Fear, guilt, sadness, anger. Those states don't create anything. Anything you want in your life, more positive, has to come from the higher states. So if you live at an unconscious level in anxiety, your life will manifest anxiety. And sort of when I hear a client say to me, I'm just anxious all the time, I thought, oh, well, you'll have anxious manifestation all the time. So, and then the question is, how do you change this? How can you create from the higher states? And that's what all the spiritual prophets, philosophers, and the big thinkers, and that's what they've said over centuries and millennia. And science is sort of proving now what they said, that that is possible to actually create that. And what we actually think is miraculous or miracles, miraculous healing, or something just, the miraculous happening in your life. I believe more and more it can actually be the normal state. And if you have tumors which can disappear and miraculous healings happen, it's actually more natural state when you live in the highest frequencies than miracles. It's that we've never fully understood it. But It's just normal laws of quantum physics and of the universe. And if we can tap into those states, which I think is a more natural way of being and thinking, you can have all of that. But that's a long stretch. And when somebody come and sit with me and they full of drugs and alcohol and they want to make these states, of course I won't say this. As we say in NLP, that is a bridge too far. But it's important for me as a therapist to have this way of thinking. Whether I share that with the client or not, it's not that important. It's more my way of thinking, because my way of thinking will create the outcome of the sessions as well. When I look at people, my way of observing people, and when they come to me with a problem, will determine their outcome for them. So the quality of the observer has a lot to do of how successful other people also is or are or not. So that's a lot there.
That's quite a bit to process. So thanks for that. But I do agree with you on what you said there. And when you mentioned the states, the different states, and you and I have spoken about this on a number of occasions regarding frequencies of specific states. So anger would operate at X frequency, happiness at Y, joy, euphoria at Z, and so on and so forth. And that is based on what's known as the Hawkins Scale. And
that's right.
It looks like a rainbow chart almost. And I know some people think it's a lot of bogus. I think there's a lot of merit to it, because I have seen in my own personal life that when I come from a higher level state, I do manifest things a lot easier and more effortlessly than what I do from a lower state. But I also have.
I think that's the right word you use there. It's effortless. There's a flow and an effortlessness in manifestation. It's not hard. It's hard, easy, natural process. It happens by itself. When these forces really work, it's not something you really have to try. It just happens. Then is what we call synchronicity. It just happens all the time. Telepathy happens. It just flows. It storms into your life. When your frequency is right, as you say, it keeps coming in. I listened to a beautiful thing someone said the other day on a show with Oprah Winfrey, where he said between us and the divine, from our perspective, there's 7 veils, but from the divine or God from the other side, there's none. And when things flow, it's when there's no veils. But we always put up the veils, whether it's conscious or unconscious. And in order to have that flow with the divine or manifesting, it's about lifting the veils, and we can lift the veils. This is what it's really about. And mostly it's in the act of, although I never liked the word, but more and more, it's in the act of surrender, where the veils actually lift and things begin to flow. And things can just happen. Is when you get outside of yourself and outside of your ego and outside of all of these unconscious stuff, then things flow and the veils lift and manifestation just happens. Healing happens. Everything just happens automatically. And there's no hardness in that or difficulty or trying. It's immediate. So it's something I become more and more aware of these days, and my thinking has changed a lot. And this, I think, the space I hold when I work with clients has a lot to do whether they make successes or not. And I think that's why people can talk about the healing space, because it's literally in that space can be different frequencies. Just walking into that space can actually make a change if that frequencies are that strong. Just being in the presence of that person can help people heal just because they carry such high frequencies and they live in that frequencies. And there's no reason we can't. I mean, if you listen to all the podcasts of people who attain those states more often through meditation or whatever techniques they do, or it becomes a way of being. If you listen to Eckhart Tolle and all of the really spiritual people, that's how they live. And and that's what I believe will eventually change the world. And maybe that's part of what we're seeing at the moment.
Yeah, probably. I mean, even a guy such as Sun Tzu, who wrote The Art of War, said that out of all the chaos comes opportunity, or out of all the chaos there is opportunity to be found, or something like that. And you can see that in a variety of ways. Whether it's financial opportunities, certain assets suddenly being, yesterday they were worth this price X, the next day they are worth half that, for exactly the same thing. No fundamental difference, but you can buy it at a lower price due to the crisis that has actually occurred. So those are the kind of opportunities you find. Other opportunities are to bring people together, to remind them of what is truly important, as opposed to complaining and moaning about the fact that we have a lockdown. Maybe look at it as a way to create other opportunities, which is why I created Black Hard Red Spade. I had this idea for a while, but now I decided, since we are under lockdown across the world, utilize it to build a portfolio and connect with other interesting people, get ideas, share ideas, speak. It's like what Jordan Peterson said, if you continuously speak with the same people over and over again who agree with you on everything, it's the equivalent of walking in a desert. You already know what they're going to tell you. You already know what they have to say. And aligning yourself with people who are willing to openly disagree with you on things is one of the best ways to learn new things, because you might actually learn something that could end up saving your life in some way or form along the line. And that to me is a really, really profound way of looking at it. And that is why I openly welcome disagreement with anything that I say, by engaging with people whom I believe have a high amount, or high degree rather, of believability, as Dalio would also point out. Believability is one of the key things. As he said, it doesn't help that you surround yourself with believable people who only agree with you all the time. That is of literally zero use. What the hell are you going to learn? Next to nothing. And that is why that is why I think that the world is changing into a different direction as well, whether we consciously know it or don't even know it. And you see it in people who are able to manifest wealth. You see it in people who are able to manifest the kind of lives that they want. And it's like wealth. One of the things that I heard about wealth the other day is that wealth creation is merely a reflection of the amount of value that you add to the people whom you serve. And I thought, wow, that is actually a very, very clever way of looking at it, because it's a transfer of value. So if you add a lot of value to your clients, and you've got a lot, you charge an appropriate amount for the service or the product or whatever that you have, and you get enough people to buy into it, you almost automatically become wealthy from that whole process, or that transfer of value, as opposed to trying to see whom you have to screw over or whose head you have to step on to get ahead in order to get to where you want to be. And that's a very old way of looking at things. And I think what we're seeing is more of a transfer of value kind of things, mentality that's slowly but surely starting to shift into the broader spectrum of society. So, I mean, if you agree with it, I would like to hear your thoughts on that. And if you disagree, obviously, as I said, please let me know, because I'm keen to hear your thoughts.
It's interesting. Well, working with clients every day, the most recurring theme, which I work with every day, is that lack of internal value, a lack of internal worth. Although on the outside, there's a lot of value and worth, and beautiful houses and cars and enough money to stack up toilet rolls for the next 20 years and stack up 5 freezers full of meat. So there's a lot of external worth. And sometimes when I sit at the coffee shop and I see all the boats going to the sea on a Sunday, and I see the worth or the value and the wealth, and then I'm wondering what is it that these people have all this external worth and they lack that inside. People who own gold mines and Boeings and cruise liners, and when I sit with them, in spite of all that external value, there's nothing internal. In some way, there's a relationship between the external and the internal. And then I work with people who can't even afford a session with me. And then they have a lot of self-worth deep inside. And although there's no external, I'm not saying that if the more external worth is, the less internal or value or worth. But sometimes there's a pattern of that. And if we add too much external, sometimes we suffer internally. It's almost like we sometimes want to make up for what we lack inside. And that's a pattern I've often seen, that people build wealth, or countries build wealth, or civilizations or nations build this wealth, and internally they poor. Psychologically, on a collective unconscious level, a nation can be poor or lack worth inside of them. And sometimes a poor nation or country can have a lot of value. But in Western society, often we look down on that way of living and thinking. We're very much focused in Western society on what you can see on the outside. In traditional societies, we sort of don't look at it as there's a huge amount of wealth there. And that is sometimes what I find lacking in our society, and I think which should shift in some way, that we can start creating and bring in this in internal worth and value again. Because I think we've become blindsided by materialism and capitalism and all the isms in the market and share prices, and if there's a collapse, it's a catastrophe. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's necessary. Maybe it's a time to rethink all of these ways, and that we can find our own inner worth in spite of what happens outside. And maybe the whole COVID-19 is a way for that. When things shut down on the outside, what, do you sit and panic for 3 months? Does your life stop? Or, as you say, or do you discover new ways? And if this is a wake-up call for us to actually relook at our lives of what really matters, and that the matter on the outside is not what matters, it's what matters is inside. And that inside is maybe not through religion or any of those ways. It's really going inside of you to find that worth and value in whatever way you want to do that, and really realize what's on the outside is just all one big illusion, and we should maybe look at it as an illusion and handle it and give it the amount of attention it deserves. And I think this is where the shift should come, and that's what all the older civilizations had, this internal worth and value. But somewhere we've lost it, because this is part of almost every client I see, is that lack of self-worth. Lack of self, in spite of everything else. We have to build this amazing civilizations, but something we've lost in that way. The lost civilization of inner self.
Yeah,
that's lost. And for me, that's my journey with clients, is to find the inner journey. And you know, when you find that, in the first thing which happens when you discover your own inner civilization again, things become less important on the outside. And the one thing which stands out, you don't want anything anymore. You don't want another house and another car and another. It doesn't really matter, because matter doesn't matter anymore. And capitalism, that's what we've lacked, because we always strive for more material stuff. And that actually takes you further away from what really matters, from the work I do. And it's once you reach that space, you realize it doesn't. Sweeping your pathway can be more satisfying than whatever new thing you can buy. And once you can get to that space, I think that's when you attain the highest states, and you get the actual freedom and peace, because that's in the end what all people want, is just to be free When they say happiness, I take as you just want to be free in a space for absolute freedom, where you become part of everything outside of you. That's for most people what happiness means in the end. Happiness is not this fleeting state of having another drink or another bite to eat and a nice movie, and now you're happy. That's very fleeting, and that's okay. But too much of that, and you just stay in those states, and you have to repeat them over and over again. It's like having some other pill, or where's my pill? I can just get my happiness shot again. And that's not what it's a stillness. It's very, I think the word which comes up today, I had a session with my hypnosis NLP peer group. We meet once a month, and I had to stop my grandfather clock because it's very loud and I, in that moment, actually, one of the participants said, "Oh, what are you doing?" I said, I've just stopped the clock. I've stopped time. And something with that resonates, because when you attain these higher states and live in it more, actually time distorts and time stops. And I think a big part of our civilization we live in, to see how screwed up it is sometimes, is this rush. It's this terrible rush to nowhere. And everyone is so busy. And when you attain higher states, you have time. And I always want to say, the more time you have, it's a measurement of the quality of your life. And as Oprah Winfrey said, it's one of the most precious commodities there is time. And when I stopped time today, I thought, that's actually exactly what it is. We should be able more often to stop time. And when I do timeline therapy and do timeline therapy courses, it is about stopping time. When I take people back into the past, into the childhood or birth, we stop time. And I put everyone on pause there, that we can change time. So for me, freedom actually means a state where time stops. And when people have near-death experiences, and I hear about, they tell me, the first thing they say to me is, it was like time slowed down, or time has stopped. And I think this is one of the measurements for, if you want to know how to get there, is sort of slow down. Slow down. And anxiety is a very fast state. It's a very fast state.
You see a lot of that here in London. You see a lot of that here in London, especially where, not now so much because of the whole COVID situation, but if you walk through the city or here close, in Canary Wharf, close to where I live, and you just see people rushing and shoop, shoop, shoop. It's like almost being on a highway. It's like being on a man-made highway, so to speak, for foot traffic, and people are just rushing by, zipping by. It's like that description that I gave you of the black hearts and the red spades, where most of us miss out on the black hearts and the red spades of life because we zip right past them. But the interesting places in between are the ones that are just off that highway. It's like, for instance, if you go to a market and all you are interested in is just going to a specific little shop, but there might be a really interesting shop, a little stall along your route. Someone who might have a really interesting product that they have to sell you, or just an interesting conversation that you could have with them, but you're missing that because you're just zipping past. You want to get to your destination. And I'm guilty of that too. I mean, I'm not going to say I'm not guilty of it. Even if I look at my own shopping behaviors, whenever I go and do my shopping, I'm what's called a cheater. So I just go in, I buy what I need, and I move out as quickly as possible because I don't like the act of shopping. But when I do sit down and I have a chat with people, I like to learn more about their lives, because I've said to people before as well, so one of the questions that often comes up is, so what do you do? And one of the things, and then they would say, oh, I'm a banker, I'm a lawyer, I'm a doctor, whatever. And I'm thinking, okay, that's all good and well. That's what you do for a living. But what else do you do? What more is there to you? Are you defined by your profession, or do you define who you are as a person in your own given right? Because it's I think it becomes, as you said, capitalism in our society has structured us in such a way where we become defined by what we do. But what we do is not what defines us. We define what we do at the end of the day. And when you mention that whole shift thing as well, it's got a very Newtonian kind of feel. When I look, and I'm a big fan of Isaac Newton's work. The laws of inertia. And his third law of inertia states that for every action, there is an opposite yet equal reaction. And you can actually take that at a spiritual level as well, if you want. You can look at it from a karmic perspective. You can look at it from a business perspective, financial markets perspective. If the markets keep going up and up and up, eventually there'll be a correction that brings it back down. And we saw it literally 3 months ago. You see, if you keep abusing, using and abusing someone or something, time will come where that thing will use and abuse you when the opportune time comes. And that is,
it's a correction, as you say. It's a correction. That's how volcanoes works and earthquakes. It's a correction.
Yeah. And you mentioned something interesting about societies as well, which I thought I'd like to bring up. I watched this movie back in 2007 called Apocalypto, which was directed by what's his name, Mel Gibson. And the movie was about one of the ancient South American societies. I think it was the Incas or the Aztecs. It's one of the two. And right at the beginning of the movie, there's this caption that says, in order for any civilization to be destroyed from the outside, it first has to destroy itself from the inside. And I think that for people, that is a very relevant thing for people as well. In order for us to be destroyed from the outside, first we have to be destroyed or destroy ourselves from the inside to a very large extent. And you can see this in societies and empires that have fallen: the Roman Empire, the Mongol Empire, the British Empire, technically rebranded, but that's another story altogether. But you can see it happening in America as well. The more Epicurean the American values system became, the more irresponsible people became with their behaviors overall. You just look at the difference between the Stoicism that was adopted by the baby boomers versus the Epicureanism that has been adopted by the millennials, I think Generation Y, and even to some extent Generation Z. So yeah, those are just the kind of things that I wanted to add onto what you said, because you did make some incredibly valuable points. So
about zipping past things. When you mentioned the zipping past things and zipping past opportunities, it's very true. The faster you go, the less you can actually see the little treasures along. It's like when I was a child, we used to stop everywhere when we traveled through South Africa and all the small towns, and had a boiled egg there and a little petit four and tea there. But these days, you zip past on the freeways and you get to your destination as quick as possible. Goal, we have to reach the goal. And I miss that little turn-offs in the journey. We all say it's about the journey, but in most people, it's mainly about the goal. You have to get to your goal, your 10-year plan, your 5-year plan, your 1-year plan. Not that that's wrong, but in the end, you actually just zip past all the goals. Actually gets meaning by the journey and the amount of enjoyment you have in the journey. I had an antique shop for many years, and one of the things which really struck me in my antique shop is when I was an observer often at clients coming in, and a lot of the people with wealth would come in and they'll zip through the shop and they'll pick out the things they want really quickly, have a bit of a negotiation about price, and out they go. And was sort of in and out and zip in, zip out. And then someone would often come in, the same person every week, and I would become aware, oh, there's someone in the shop. And I would see, oh, it's this lady from the hospital. And she would just say, I'm just here for my weekly beauty or weekly fix. I just want to appreciate all the beauty. And
Wow.
there was no zipping, and she made time. She never bought anything. And it made such an impression on me that she actually appreciated the beauty. She never had money to buy any of the items, but there was so much awe in that. And something interesting is often I would watch her in the shop, and often maybe this week she would touch one item and say, no, this is my favorite this week. And that appreciation and almost connecting to the beauty of that piece. And time again, that's a piece in which will sell the next day. It's almost like she brings it alive. And in those days, I didn't know much about science and quantum physics, but now I understand that actually everything is just frequencies. And when you connect in higher states of gratitude to stuff, you actually change the stuff you connect to. So her connecting and not zipping past these antiques and beautiful things, and having a moment of appreciation and love and awe, and that actually enlightens the piece and helped the piece to actually move and sell. So I was just thinking, it was such a something I didn't understand then, but which I understood now, and I can still see the lady just appreciating beauty, having. And I would always say, but are you not in a rush? And she would say to me, I have all the time in the world. And it's such a beautiful thing to say, because when we have time for something, it actually means you have love for that thing.
Yes.
The whole thing about I don't have time means you have no love for that. And when we work with people, when I work with relationship and couples and marriages, we zip past each other as well. And, we don't even look at each other when we speak in the relationship. It's literally, I'm listening, speak to me. Just in a lot of marriages and relationships, it's literally sitting down, and when the person speaks, give them all your attention. It can be as simple as that. Just listen. You don't have to say anything. You can just sit. And if you want to have relationship therapy or couple therapy, before you go, just change that. Just sit and listen. And you don't have to respond. Or if you want to respond, say, oh, that was interesting. Or, wow, I didn't think of that. That's all. That's basic. And all relationship is not having time for each other. And not the bit of time you have with each other is when you zip past each other and you don't really listen. You can, people go for all these relationship courses and therapy, and that's a basic. You don't need a therapist for that. Just do it. Just do it and make it a habit, and your relationship already much better. Just by having that look, listen, and really listen. Really listen. Pay attention. Pay attention when somebody speaks to you. It's easy for me as a therapist, but when I speak to people, I really pay attention. I mean, that's one of the basic things I've learned in my first NLP course 13 years ago, is really pay attention. Because when I pay attention, the quality of the attention I pay already changes the thing I'm paying attention to. And that's such an important concept in physics. The quality of my attention I pay change the very thing I am looking at. So we are,
and that can apply to anything.
We don't know it.
And clearly
anything.
That can apply to anything. Wow. It's such a valid point that you make there. Sorry, go on, Ernest.
And when we talk about the whole quantum Zeno effect in coaching, and it's a really interesting concept in science. And the concept in science means that they observe that beryllium atoms actually slow down when they are measured, and the breakdown of the atom, the half-lifetime, slow down. So the more it's measured, the more it slows down. So, and that's a very interesting thing, because that says that the more we look at something and the more we focus on something, the more it actually slows down the process and it can't move on. What does that actually mean? So that means if you keep focusing on something, and the actual manifestation cannot really happen, because the way you look at something is most often a place of anxiety and worry and fear. That's why you keep looking. if you really believe in something, you can let it go and you don't have to focus on it all the time. It's like somebody opening the oven all the time, baking a cake. When my mother baked a cake when I was a boy, I keep opening it. It's like, oh, well, remember then the cake will fall down and there's all tears and slaps and whatever, all those. And in a sense, that's exactly what the quantum Zeno effect says, is that if you keep measuring something and keep looking at it, it stops. You have to let it go and trust. Once you know what you want, let it go. And actually the process can happen by itself. And we slow down things the more we measure it with measurements of anxiety and fears, and talking about the problem all the time will actually make the problem become more, or will make it can never change, because people say, I just can't change it. Of course you can't, because you keep talking about it. Things change by themselves when you can let them go. Once it's your state changed, you don't have to focus it anymore. It will just happen. And that's actually a very interesting aspect of the quantum Zeno effect, is that we slow things down. I'm thinking when you work with people who try to get pregnant, and the more they focus on that, the less it will actually happen. The ones that let it go and surrender, and it can actually happen. Healing and a lot of cancers and miraculous healings are the same. Once you let it go and shift your focus to other things, the process can go on. The healing can happen. The process can go on. So we slow down with wherever we focus on, and that's why I said it's so important. Your observer, the observer effect, is so powerful. And the quality of your focus. What is the quality you focus? What is that measurement you make? Is it a measurement of anger? Is it a measurement of fear? Is it a measurement of guilt? Because that will change what you focus on as well. And it will slow down the process, and change cannot go to the next state. And that's why people, when someone say to me, I'm stuck, what I'm hearing is the quality of my focus keeps me where I am. Actually, it's sort of, we keep ourselves stuck by the way we focus and the way we look. And life never stops. Life moves from one state to the other, but we stop life. Life doesn't stop us. We stop life by the quality of our focus and what we pay attention to. And once I've learned that concept from my trainer in America, John Oberdorf, it's sort of changed my whole way of looking. And I'm very aware of how I look at people. And, when I would say look at people or look at things, it's also, I want to use the word judge, because judge is a way of measuring. And the way you measure things and judge people is how they would be more of. So when I judge people and what they're doing and not having a balanced measurement, they become more of what I judge them. And that's interesting, because that's in society. Then we judge certain groups of people, and then they become more like that, and we judge them more, and then they make even more of how we judge them. So if you want people to change, then it's really about changing you and your way of looking.
Yeah.
Now, people say, does that mean that I have to look at murderers and all these people and say wonderful? No, of course not.
No.
But it's the act of measurement. You can still not agree with the behavior and still measure with love, measure with patience, measure with openness. And that eventually gives that person the best chance to change.
You always reminded me of this fact when we discussed the Ho'oponopono concept in healing, where and for those who are not familiar with it, it's a really fascinating Hawaiian healing technique, largely used by a guy called Dr. Hugh Lin, who was said to have healed an entire psych ward at a criminal facility in Hawaii. And he said that the reality of these of Ho'oponopono is that you take responsibility for yourself, And one of the really hard concepts to swallow for most people, myself included, is that all those shitty attributes that you see in other people, the murderer, the pedophile, the psychopath, the mass murderer or the thief, whatever the compulsive liar, whatever you dislike, they also exist within you. They're just not as developed to the same extent. And by taking responsibility for the fact that they also exist within you and healing those parts, the quantum effect is, as we were discussing earlier, is that you heal other parts of the world by healing parts within yourself because of the old interconnectedness. And I think that is the part that is so freaking hard for most people, is that nobody really wants to acknowledge that those crap attributes also exist within us, because you want to see yourself as being separate from that, somehow being elevated from that, when in fact you're not as elevated as what you think you are. And it's
the demon us, that separateness.
Yeah.
We are not like them. They separate. They different. That different. Yeah. The good and the evil and the
And
that's
And I think that's exactly that's exactly the point that you're making here as well, is that that us and them is what often it's an illusionary barrier, so to speak. Even if you look at many of the protests that are going on around the world at the moment, you know, with the whole George Floyd thing, and it's bloody sad what happened to him. You know, that a police officer who's meant to serve and protect could go and kill someone by literally leaning his knee on the back of someone's neck. I mean, that is a brutal bloody way to essentially kill someone. But also, what people need to keep in mind is that it's all good and well to protest peacefully and all that, but looting and pillaging is not the way to get a positive message across. Two wrongs cannot somehow just commit a right. You know, mathematics, you know, at a quantum level and mathematical level, it doesn't work that way. And you can't just go and justify one bad behavior with another bad behavior and then use a collective word as an umbrella term to say, but this justifies it all. It just doesn't bloody work that way. And that's why. Sorry, go ahead.
It's interesting that you mentioned that. I was talking to someone the other day as well who said the same, and it brought me up one of the primary NLP beliefs is like the meaning of communication is the response you get. So it made me think about what you're just saying. So if the way I communicate is not bringing the response, then in some way I have to communicate differently. So if you think over time, I think there's time for peaceful protests, and then I think there was a French Revolution, and there was a First World War, and there was a Second World War, and I don't know how many more. But in the end, these type of things it's to bring change, and it's how can you communicate in the end that the message actually gets across? And I think there's a whole spectrum, and NLP says that it's in a way that you keep communicating till the person on the other side gets the message. Now, that doesn't mean throwing things around all the time, because maybe if that's the only way, you know, that message won't get across, like in violent relationships. But I think there's a whole spectrum from communication, from peaceful to maybe sometimes more volatile or more violent. I think in the whole spectrum of communication, it's not staying in the one and finding one in the end which works, and usually it will be a mix, maybe a peace, and maybe there's sometimes more volatility and then peace again. But it's not war all the time, and I don't think so. But it is about keep communicating till you get the change you want. I mean, in South Africa, we had from very volatile and almost wars to, in the end, the actual talks. Is how do the message actually get across? And I think that's in the end what people want, is that the message gets across. And when people protest like that, they just want to see that the message gets across, that there is some change. And that can be over the whole spectrum, not only one way. So no, if you only grab your hammer and smash things, perhaps you have to learn a new way of communicating for someone else who is always just doing it very softly, and maybe that person would do a bit more harder communication. It's maybe moving into the spaces where you're not used to communicate. Just stretch yourself in the end a little bit. So it's an interesting concept. I'm also not for, I like restoring and restoration. So for me, I don't like things which is being broken, and but I have to keep an open view and see how. I have to think what action, what are they, through what eyes are they looking, what are their beliefs, what are their values, for me to keep a more open mind when I look at things, and not just immediately judge, but have a wider perspective. That doesn't mean I don't have an opinion, but it's a wider opinion, and my opinion these days have a bit of a wider light instead of a laser light. It's more like a spotlight which can open up a bit more, which I was not used to have, and it was uncomfortable by changing that lens. It can include a bit more. That has come with time, which makes my life sometimes easier, and I don't have to look at things and being almost upset by it immediately. It just gives me a wider window of opportunity, if I can put it like that. A bit more space and a bit more
like choice. Peripheral vision almost.
Yes, on the inside. Yeah, have a peripheral vision inside your soul, and expand that borders inside of you. And I must, if it wasn't for the therapies I've studied, I think I would have been a much poorer person. And through the NLP and hypnosis and EMDR and a lot of other learnings I've made through the years, I've managed to open my internal eyes and look with a wider eye, observing with a much wider eye, instead of that right and wrong and the critical eye. I've managed to open up that window a bit more, and that is a easier place to be because you're not upset by things all the time. It really helps when you can see the bigger perspective. But it doesn't come just by, we don't get perspective that easy. It takes a perspective change. Often means smashing inside of us something. So the smashing on the outside, when you see shops being looted, but for change to happen, something inside of you has to smash sometimes. So maybe that's a external symbolism for what needs to happen on the inside. Is we have to smash things inside of us. Things have to break inside of us. And again, on a very one-on-one, when I work with a client, real change actually comes when you break through those barriers and it smashes and breaks down. And that's when you enter a space of, okay, now I'm willing to change. So what I'm seeing on the outside, I sometimes just look at it as a symbolic way of civilizations have to smash inside to be reinvented again and go to the next level. Otherwise, it stagnates and it keeps repeating the same thing. Change can't go on, as we say with the quantum Zeno effect, because you keep focusing in the same way. And that's where you want to change people's attitudes and perspectives. And yeah, I'm not saying smashing is the only way. It's sad if that is, because that's only a part of a bigger spectrum if there's some smashing involved. It's just, change doesn't happen through that only. We can't use violence in a way as the only way of change. It's part of change, but in the end, real change happens in silence, inside.
Yeah.
I was thinking of that movie Ratatouille, where the mouse says, he asks what do you want to eat, and he says, bring me a plate of perspective. And in the whole of Paris, they couldn't find one plate of perspective. In all the fine diners and the best wines, they didn't have perspective. And yes, I think this becomes sort of my motto, is just to have perspective. It's a word which you never really get to. You can, it's like hyperbole, you can get close to it, but you'll never get there. my goal in life is to keep perspective and keep coming back to perspective. Always tune in, retune, because it's always about retuning yourself. Because we lose that tuning, we lose that frequency so easily. It happens so automatically. You have to keep doing that all the time. You cannot not tune yourself daily. Whatever practice you use, it's a daily tuning.
Absolutely.
Through whatever way we do that, whether it's prayer or meditation or mind techniques or whatever you use, you have to tune your mind all the time. And that would mean widening. It's never focusing in, it's focusing out.
Absolutely. And
right.
you just to finish off on a few points, because we've discussed this into quite a lot of detail, is that, as you said, it's like a musical instrument. You have to keep tuning it, otherwise it does go out of tune. If you play the strings or you play the keys for a while, once a year you've got to tune your piano. If you play guitar frequently, you've got to tune it at least a few times a month, sometimes even daily, just to get it back to where it is. And for me, for instance, I find that by physical exercise is a way that I tune myself and I tune my body. By doing things such as gymnastics rings, such as handstands, deep hip opening exercises, which are bloody hard for me. I'm not going to lie to you. Some things are really, really damn hard for me to do, but I know that if I don't push beyond that pain, my body is just going to remain stuck in a certain state of pain to begin with. And there will be pain when you open up certain other aspects of your life, and there will be pain when you open up your mind and your heart to certain things. But it's like what I do now, and I've only started doing it now at the age of 35. Can you believe it? Is that I'm stretching virtually every day now. Just to loosen up my hamstrings, just to loosen up my back, because my body was starting to say to me, "It's freaking hell, Adrian, you've done certain things for so long. You need to loosen up these things." And even by loosening up, the pain is starting to come to the surface a lot more. But I know that if I don't break through that pain barrier, I'm just going to remain stuck in the same state of pain to begin with. And I think that's the shitty part of going through the motions, but it's the essential part of going through the motions. As Rocky Balboa would say, you've got to be willing to go through the battling to get to be what you want to be and do what you want to do. And if you're willing to do that, then that's all good and fine. But Ernest, I don't think there was any way that we were
that's why people do. That's why people do. Say?
No. I mean, what I wanted to say is that I don't think there was any hope on God's green earth that we were able to discuss all the things that we wanted to get through in one conversation. I mean, it's just not possible, given your immense depth of knowledge and everything that you had. But I just want to say thank you so much for the time that you devoted towards this. And, I would very much like to schedule a follow-up conversation to delve more into some of the other topics. When you mentioned about interfering with the quantum Zeno effect, there's a general term called heterogenics, where interfering can do more harm than good. And, I think in the world that we are in, we, as Taleb would say, there's a lot of generalized heterogenics taking place, where we think we do a lot of good by interfering, but we're actually doing more harm by interfering. And, I would like to get your perspective on those things as well in a follow-up conversation with you. But I just wanted to say once again, thank you so much for the time. It's been an absolute immense pleasure to just reconnect with you at this level and just hear your thoughts. And look forward to the next one.
Thanks. It was a pleasure for me as well, Adrian. All right, thank you.
So have a great evening. Yeah, it's evening on your side now. So have a great evening.
It's dinner time.
Enjoy dinner, Ernest.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.